1969, the Showa era. The ATM was first introduced to Japan. Over 450 Tokyo University students were arrested in riots against the police, and landslides in Kagoshima and Miyazaki killed 89 people. The late 1960s were a different time to now, slower and a little less hectic, but certainly not any less dangerous. In fact, for one junior high boy and his family, their entire lives were about to be changed. On February 23, 1969, 14-year-old Shouyama Jin was working on some crafts for school on his home veranda. It was a Sunday, and just after 2 p.m. that afternoon, he put his things down and went inside to tell his parents he was heading into town for a bit. He grabbed his school hat to go with his uniform and went outside, and was never seen again. To this day, over 50 years later, what happened to Jin after he left his house remains a mystery. Was he kidnapped? Murdered? Did he have an accident? Did he run away from home? Things were about to get even weirder. At 6 p.m. that day, 4 hours after Jin left home, a 24-year-old man showed up at the Shouyama house, holding the boy's hat. The first words out of his mouth shocked the boy's parents. "The owner of this hat stole my money." Jin had yet to return home, but his parents had yet to find his absence strange enough to go to the police. It had only been a few hours after all, and he was a teenage boy out on a Sunday afternoon. The strange man at their door continued. "I was on a road in the city around 3:30 p.m. A bike had fallen into a ditch, and I tried to help 2 boys out of it. I took my jumper off and placed it on the side of the road to help them. One of the boys suddenly grabbed my jumper and ran, and then the junior high student followed him. There was 460,000 yen in that jumper pocket. I chased after the junior high student and grabbed this hat out of his back pocket, but the 2 of them got away. I found you by relying on the name written in the hat." According to this stranger, 2 teenage boys had laid a trap for him, leaving an empty bike on the side of the road and then swiping the man's jumper when he stopped to check it out. That jumper just happened to be full of nearly 500,000 yen. The man claimed to have grabbed the hat he was holding, Jin's hat, the same one he'd grabbed before leaving the house several hours earlier, and it was his name inside the hat that had led him to their house. This, obviously, was a lot to take in. If this strange man was to be believed, their son had just robbed someone and taken off. Could it be true? It sounded nothing like their boy, and they had no idea who this man holding his hat was either. The man left, and Jin didn't return home that night. The next day, the boy's father received a strange letter addressed to him. "Dispensing with preliminaries. I'm sorry for worrying you. One of my bad friends made me steal the money. There was more than 400,000 yen in there, but I only received a little. Please tell school that I'll be absent for a while until I sort myself out. I'll return home soon and apologize. Please don't come looking for me. Jin." It was, apparently, a confession. If the letter was to be believed, Jin admitted to stealing the money from the man and was letting his family know that he wouldn't be home for a while. He requested that they let his school know he wouldn't be in because he needed to sort himself out. The note ended with, "Please don't come looking for me." The note immediately sounded suspicious. It was almost too well written. It had their son admitting to stealing the money. He blamed some bad friends for making him do it, and it also gave him an excuse to be missing for a while longer. Yet perhaps the strangest part of all was, it was Jin's handwriting. It really did appear to be written with his own hand. But had he written it of his own free will? the mystery was just beginning. Jin had been missing for 24 hours and, with the mysterious note from him in hand, his parents finally called the police. Jin disappeared on a Sunday afternoon in his school uniform, which wasn't that strange of a sight at the time, and an unknown man had shown up on their door holding his hat and claiming the boy stole his money. Then a note arrived seeming to confirm that. Something fishy was going on, and the police agreed. Police immediately set their sights on the man with Jin's hat. The unnamed 24-year-old was working in a cleaning store at the time, but as it turned out, he had just been released on parole 4 months earlier from a 2-year stint in juvenile prison. This didn't necessarily mean that he was the criminal here, but it did make the police look deeper, and it wasn't long until several doubts about the man were raised. First, where did he get nearly 500,000 yen from, and why was he carrying it on his person? He'd only been out of prison for 4 months and was carrying the equivalent of over $28,000 in today's currency. His job as a cleaner was hardly the highest paying job around, so there was no way he'd saved that much money in the few months he'd been working there. When asked about it, the man claimed that he had hidden the money under the floor of his family home, yet his family claimed to know nothing about it. The origins of the supposed money couldn't be traced, and the man had a criminal record. Suspicions rose. Second, there were no witnesses to the incident the man described. According to his story, the boy stole his jumper full of money around 3:30 p.m. in broad daylight from a city street. Yet, nobody saw them there. No bike tracks were found anywhere near where the man claimed the incident happened, and it was a Sunday, meaning no banks were open, and thus no need for him to be carrying around so much money to begin with. Not only that, but how were the boys to know he had so much money on him to begin with? The man himself claimed the money was hidden inside his jumper. It seems unlikely that they would have targeted a man at random just to steal his jumper, not knowing what might be in it, and just happened to get lucky with this ex-con carrying a large amount of cash. Third, despite the letter being in Jin's handwriting, one phrase in particular seemed off. Dispensing with preliminaries. This was not something Jin had ever said or used before, and seemed oddly formal for a 14-year-old boy writing to his parents. Police quickly drew their own conclusions about what had really happened. The more likely scenario was that Jin hadn't stolen this man's money with a friend and then run off, but that this man had actually kidnapped Jin and was attempting to ransom him back to his parents for the stolen money. Money that likely never existed in the first place. A large-scale search was organised to find the boy the day after he disappeared. The city and surrounding mountains were scoured, yet no sign of him was found. Several days later, they hooked the 24-year-old up to a lie detector test during questioning, but they were unable to pin anything on him. The police had theories, but no evidence, and the man refused to incriminate himself. The working theory at the time was that the man, only referred to as A, kidnapped Jin, hid him somewhere secret, forced him to write the note that was later delivered to his parents, and then showed up on their doorstep with his hat in an attempt to get money out of them. It wasn't the most complicated plan, but further investigations led police to believe that he wasn't working alone either. A likely had accomplices. Before he showed up at the Shouyama house, A had been seen around town asking people where the boy lived, yet he wasn't the only one. Half an hour before that, 3 entirely different men had also been seen around town asking the very same question. It's likely that, by this stage, Jin had already been kidnapped, but for whatever reason, refused to give up, or couldn't give up, his address. Who were these men, and why did they want to know where Jin lived? It was too much of a coincidence, but police were unable to track down who these men were. They were possibly friends of A's from prison, but with only a few eyewitness reports to go off, they were unable to identify who they were. In the end, the police were unable to find Jin, and they were also unable to pin anything on A. It's been theorized that when Jin's parents went to the police instead of paying the man back the money that their son had stolen, he was killed and disposed of, but to this day, no body has ever been found. The case immediately went cold and remains unsolved to this day. A year later, A moved and resettled in a different prefecture. Several years after Jin's disappearance, he took part in an interview that raised even more suspicions. He was still unable to confirm where the money came from, but mysteriously revealed that he would probably have to say it someday. What this meant remains unknown, but the implication behind it suggested the money wasn't clean, and he felt that someday he might be forced to reveal why. When asked about how the boys knew to steal the man's jumper full of money, his answer was even less convincing. Yeah, you couldn't see it from the outside. Come to think of it, that is strange. Yes, it really is. Yet perhaps the biggest tell of all was when the reporter asked A about how tall Jin was. A reportedly jumped in his chair, as though he'd received a shock, and muttered, "About the same size as me, or maybe a little taller." A was short and a stout man, while Jin, at only 14 years of age, was just under 170 centimeters. This would have had him towering over A. How could he confuse the boy being the same height as him? There's only one real explanation for this. He didn't know because he never actually saw Jin. At least, not on the side of the road where he claimed the boy stole his jumper full of money. Police long suspected that A was not working alone. This single statement made it seem even more likely that he was working with others. Undoubtedly, the same 3 men seen around town asking for Jin's house that same day. Yet this statement seems to suggest that it was them, not A, who kidnapped the boy. The motive seems clear. They wanted to ransom his parents for the 500,000 yen they claimed he had stolen. Money that probably didn't exist in the first place. They likely recruited A, fresh out of prison, gave him the boy's hat, and sent him off to Jin's house in their stead. After all, if he wasn't directly involved in the crime, it would be much harder for the police to pin anything on him, because there would be no evidence tying him to it. And they were right. The police were unable to do anything without hard evidence tying A to Jin, and the case still remains unsolved. Yet this theory remains unproven as well. Considering how much time has passed, we may never find out what happened to Jin that fateful day. A possible story of kidnap and ransom emerged from investigations, but nothing could be proven, and ultimately, if a crime did indeed take place, the criminals got away with it. Jin was never seen again. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time.